Hi guys, it's Ray here from City Fan TV. I'm joined today by Matt Cutler, who is an ex-sports journalist and he's a big Villa fan. And we're here to talk about Douglas Luiz. How you doing, Matt? You okay?
Doing all right. Thanks, Ray. How's it going?
It's all right, mate. It's all right. Bit hot in Manchester today. Probably the same in Birmingham. We're going to talk about Douglas Luiz, and I'm going to start off by going through some background on the kid. And then I'll ask Matt some questions. And Matt, obviously, who's seen him, I guess, almost week in, week out. We'll probably see Douglas Luiz 2 games a season and a few bits of highlights, whereas Matt's been watching him week in, week out. So just going to give you a quick background. Douglas Luiz, he was a Brazilian kid. He's 22 years old now. And he was at Vasco da Gama down in his home country. City bought him in 2017. Got him on a 5-year contract. We paid about 11 million pounds for him. He couldn't get a work permit because he hadn't played for Brazil and he wasn't going to be playing for City in the first team. So we sent him out on loan to Girona for a season. I think it was so. He's a season at Girona. And then we tried to get him back the summer before on a work permit. We tried to sort that out. We couldn't get that sorted. He went back to Girona again. So he's done 2 seasons at Girona, played 38 games over those 2 seasons. Last summer, City really thought we'd get him in. I think Pep had made some, the work permit appeal. Pep had either said something or written something, said how good this kid was, but it was turned down again, primarily because he hadn't played for the Brazilian national team and he wasn't going to be a first choice in City's team. We couldn't guarantee a certain number of games. So I think it's a very good idea. We sold him on to Villa for about £15 million. I believe there was either a sell-on clause or a buyback clause, something we've started to do over the last few years. If your kid makes it, Villa sell him on. Obviously, we'll get some money, same like we're hearing with Jadon Sancho. And if he makes it, maybe we choose to buy him back, either to play him ourselves for City or to sell him on again. Now, he's played a lot of games for you guys this year. He's played 35 league games, 3 goals. And I do remember his first goal for you. It was about a 35-yard thunderbolt against Bournemouth. He's played 1 game for the Brazilian national team. That was back in October in a friendly, which kind of makes me feel if he was to come to City, somebody else, we'll get to that later, there's more chance of him getting a work permit, especially playing 35 games for you guys. So that's the intro on Douglas Luiz. I've got to ask you, Matt, how did you feel when you signed him? Did you know anything about him?
We didn't know anything about a lot of the players we signed in pre-season, about whenever it was, a year or so ago now. So I think he came in very late, from my memory, in the transfer window. And obviously, like Villa, we'd come up from 5th in the Championship. So it's not as even if we'd run away with the Championship. So we needed, we had our core: Grealish, McGinn, Tyrone Mings down the middle, but we had quite a lot of rebuilding to do around them. So he came in with like 10 other signings, some big money signings as well. So it's fair to say we didn't really know anything about him. There was the one thing that did come with him was one is Brazilian. So we signed 2 Brazilians, and with him and Wesley, and that's always something you get excited about as a Premier League football fan. But there was always this Pep likes him. That was always something that came with Douglas Luiz's his name. That Guardiola's signed him. He's seen him play. He's put him out on loan. He hasn't sold him, so he's there. And he was always touted to us as if this is a guy who will probably one day play for Man City. And Pep likes him. Pep, one of, if not the best managers globally, backs him. And it was also him. I guess the one interesting thing is we didn't really know much about his position. I mean, maybe I don't watch La Liga too frequently. As you said, he played a couple of pre-season games every couple of years, and
for Girona, he played 38 games over 2 seasons. It's not a lot.
No, that makes sense. And so we knew he was a midfielder, but we didn't know a lot. We didn't know a lot about him. So yeah, it was. We're excited to see him thrown into the mix, but it was a bit of an unknown, just like a load of other players at that time.
Yeah, I mean, you signed a lot of players for a lot of money. It was well over £100 million, and for a lot of the season, it looked pretty precarious. But end of the day, you got out of the mire. So what? I mean, obviously he's an exciting talent because he's Brazilian and everything else you said.
Yeah.
Were you expecting him to hit the ground running? I mean, I don't know what the Villa fans' expectations were. I did speak to some early in the season when they said they'd beat City and they'd stay up comfortably. And I just thought, I remember the Punjabi villain said you'd beat us when you played us, and you'd be comfortable in top half of the table. And it's like, guys, you got to get you got to think about it, because Fulham struggled and teams struggle. It's a hard league to come back to. So did you expect him to hit the ground running, or how long did you think? You spent a lot of money, 15 million on him. How long do you think it would take him to find his feet?
Yeah, it's interesting. To be honest, we kind of needed all our players to hit the ground running, because that's the thing. Like, you can, Premier League season, if you start off, if you struggle, yes, you can turn it around, but it puts you in a terrible position. And so I think we did expect, given he'd played, basically a full season in, La Liga, one of the top divisions in Europe. It's not as if it's. We signed a lot of players from the Belgian league. So we signed Wesley and Marvelous Nakamba, two of our big signings from the Belgian league. And no disrespect to the Belgian league, but it's not as if you sign a player then knowing that they're going to hit the ground running in the UK or in the Premier League. And so I guess there was an expectation that he'd be able to slot in quite quickly. And it's probably fair to say that he not that I say he struggled, but he was very inconsistent the front end of the year. One thing that we Villa fans, or at least I really struggled to actually understand what position he was either playing or meant to play, or what his best position was, because you mentioned the absolute screamer he scored against Bournemouth. He did that a few times. He did a few times in the season, but he was still there, that defensive midfielder. At least he was lining up to be that defensive midfielder position. And so there was always a bit of confusion. Like, is he supposed to be like a box-to-box midfielder? Is he supposed to be, is attacking his traits, or is defensively his best traits? And he was almost, he didn't really kind of pigeonhole him in that position. And actually, he didn't start all, the games, and that for having been a bit inconsistent. Yeah. And there's the attacking flair. We could see it was there with the scoring. But if he's wanting to be defensively, he gave the ball away quite a lot. He wasn't that kind of like tenacious, almost like kind of like an N'Golo Kante type player who's always biting at your ankles, always there. That kind of even though it's quite small, it's actually that massive presence in the defensive midfielder, which I think is what we really needed, and what Dean Smith saw in him. So I guess in the start of the season we saw the early signs of class, but just that inconsistency and almost like an uncertainty of what exactly role he was playing in the team.
Yeah. I mean, when we obviously we would see highlights on Match Today or wherever, and that's what I saw. On one hand, you see a screamer, then you see him giving the ball away or getting dispossessed when near your own penalty area or something like that. But that happened to a lot of your players. I mean, I think Grealish in one of your early games, I think there's no argument that he's your best player, and for all the fantastic stuff he did early on, he seemed to be struggling as well. He'd lose the ball in the box or just outside the box, he'd make a mistake. And it was, I don't know if it's just some naivety, inexperience from some of your players. A lot of them had been lumped into this side, and half of them, I guess, maybe not even played in the Premier League before. But he improved over the season. And I think from reading some stuff, especially after the restart. Now, could you see the difference between let's call it pre-lockdown and post-lockdown, or after the restart, an improvement, and what can you attribute that to?
I think after lockdown he was our best player. Like, he played an intrinsic role in us staying up, and it was really him finding that defensive position. I was reading some stats like halfway through lockdown, where he'd actively not been getting into the opposition's box as much as he had been. So he obviously likes that attacking part of his game, and he's obviously good at it. He can definitely do it, but he was almost better tasked at that defensive midfield role, and he was superb in kind of like in winning the ball back, in being that kind of presence, tackles, blocks in particular. He was so many times in that post-COVID period where the difference between someone getting a shot on target and someone not getting the shot on target. He was the difference of that, and it's really important when Villa, I think before COVID or before the the lockdown, we'd proven that we can score goals, but we still, our defense was, pretty, it wasn't good enough to keep us in the Premier League. So having our defense improved, and he was a key part of it. And also he was there. I guess the way that we used him, or he played to keep that attacking nature, was in passing. He was almost this almost like quarterback figure, where that kind of defensive midfielder who's there to sit back, but is also there dispersing the play with some brilliant cross-field balls. You felt that at the start of the season, if he was on the ball and in front of the back four, that he was going to lose it or was going to make a mistake. That type of thing never happened. And so I don't know. The magic to why that happened. There's a few things I know definitely happened. One is, I think you mentioned it earlier, his English improved, and I saw Dean Smith saying in an interview that he was learning English since August. But if you've flown into a city that you've never lived in before and you've got to throw straight into the action, it's not as if you can expect someone to, in their spare time, just learn English and be able to communicate with your players better. So there was something definitely around him, his English improving, getting to know the players. We threw together that team, and so having that time to properly get to know players must have played a big role. So yeah, I think he's been superb. Been superb, and I don't hesitate to say, you're right, Grealish is our best player, and he had some good games, he had some bad games post COVID, but Douglas Luiz was the person we could rely on to perform, basically, and that's what we needed. And so it shouldn't be understated, the role he played in us staying up.
Absolutely. I mean, you've gone through some of his better qualities. What do you think are his best qualities? Where do you think his best position is, and what kind of role?
I think it's that, if I was going to compare it to other players in the Premier, I think the closest City player will probably be Fernandinho. It's kind of like that, or Fabinho in Liverpool, or kind of Wilfred Ndidi at Leicester. He's that player sitting in front of the back four, not going into the opposition half unless he really, really needs to, and just being that almost kind of like sweeper in front of the back four is definitely where he's best placed. And so you can tell like this, the whole Brazilian flair of just being so comfortable on the ball under pressure. That's one thing that, okay, if you're coming into a team, you're coming into a league where, I'm guessing you haven't played in the Premier League before Villa, it's really difficult to kind of understand the pace, and therefore that's where mistakes come. But it's that kind of presence in front of the back four is definitely his strong point. And he was there, that the kind of the blocking thing, that's where that comes into it as well, where he's always there helping protect, helping cover for players, helping cover for defenders, and making tackles. That was like tackles after COVID was another thing that you noticed way more of. It was just making tackles, winning the ball back, that type of like tenacious defensive midfielder.
Yeah. What is his weaknesses? What does he? Because he's only 22, he's not got it all. What does he need to improve upon?
Yeah, and actually that's a good point. Like, he's only 22. I think he had a lot of expectation. If you come to Villa and you're one of Pep's guys and you've played in La Liga a couple of, you kind of forget that he's 22. That's still pretty young for a player. So I think his weaknesses is still, he's not. There's some positioning aspects that I noticed were like particularly around set pieces. He's probably still got a mistake in him. I mean, so do most players. And there's probably that tendency to kind of push on too forward. So he's like he must love that attacking nature of his game, and I guess if you're one of those players who can score goals and you can score those 35-yard bangers, being told or being asked not to do that must be very difficult. But I'd say he took his role perfectly. That whole thing I was saying before about not going into the opposition's box as much as he did pre-COVID, it was definitely noticeable. So I don't know. He's so young. It's amazing to see the change post-COVID and pre-COVID. So there's no glaring part of his game I'd say he's particularly weak.
how far can he go? As we said, he's very young. It's only one season, and you could argue it's only 10 or 12 games that he's really been consistent, really consistently excelled. But how far do you think he can go? And what do you actually think his value should be? Let's forget about COVID and just give valuations on as if it wasn't there. How far can he go, and what do you think he's worth now?
I think he could definitely play in a top 6 team for sure. Another thing to think about is that he's playing. Villa, we have some class, but we still finished 17th in the league, and so he's playing with players who are not as good as him, who are older than him, who have more Premier League experience. So, and it's the same with Jack Grealish, right? That's one of the arguments why people, he's a big Villa fan and he loves the club, but just think how good he could be playing with players around him who are world class. Yeah. So I think he could play for City definitely. And what does that mean for how much is he worth? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I haven't got a clue how much players are worth these days.
I'm just saying that you paid 15 million for him. Do you think he's worth the money, or he's worth more than that?
Must be worth more. Must be worth more than that. If you're thinking of, well, I don't know, the comparison that comes into my head, and you've probably discussed this on previous chats about kind of Nathan Ake, who has got he's got Premier League experience, but I guess you're not signing him necessarily as a first choice, right? You're signing him as a backup player, but you wouldn't sign Douglas Luiz, I don't think, as a backup player. So immediately you're placing his valuation mid 50 million. I don't know. Just put that lower.
It's hard to put the valuation on, but he's still only young. So you think, okay, there's still a lot of obviously potential to discover. It's very hard to say, but with a good, I think overall a pretty good first season behind him, his valuation must be at least double. 30, 40 million. If, as you say, if Ake's going for 40 million, Douglas Luiz. If you feel he should be comfortably in a top 6 side, he's got that is at that level, then you're looking at maybe 30, 40, 50 million quid, which leads on to the next question. Can Villa keep him? As I said, we've got this sell-on or apparently a buyback clause. We've seen it before where City sold Angelino for 5 or 6 million. I think it was 5 million quid, and then bought him back for 6 million from PSV after he's had a great year, because other clubs were sniffing around him and talking about 20, 25 million. And so City look at the value in that, just bringing him back. He played 6 months and then looking to sell him on and make 10, 15 million quid profit. So, there has been rumours that Arsenal and others have been interested in him. So who do you think could be in for him? And do you think he's going to stay at Villa out of loyalty, or given the opportunity, because you give him his chance in the Premier League, would he go somewhere else just because, if Arsenal or Spurs come calling, would he go there?
I think it's so funny as well with COVID and how these seasons are going to pan out. I think, so at the time of recording, the Premier season starts in a month, so that's pretty soon, right? I think what's going to happen at Villa, it might be a bit of a domino. There might be a kind of a house of cards is probably a better way to put it. That if one piece of that falls, then it might just completely go. Like if we could probably keep Douglas Luiz if we invest in players rather than sell players. If we sell Grealish and there's all these rumours that United are in for him for 80 million quid, then all of a sudden, if I'm Douglas Luiz, I'm thinking, what, a Villa a selling club, or are they going to buy to have a serious go at this Premier League thing? And we've still got a core of good players, but we need to heavily invest. We need to heavily invest in defenders. We need to heavily invest in strikers. And all of a sudden, if Grealish goes, and to be honest, it's the other way around as well. If Villa sold Douglas Luiz, who's one of our best players this season, if you're a Grealish or you're a John McGinn or you're a Tyrone Mings, do you want, and you can go and play for a team that's better than Villa, at least at the moment, then you're probably going to your head is way more easily turned. So I hope we keep him. It's interesting. I'd love to get inside Pep's head about it, because Pep has obviously been following him for a while, and he obviously rated him originally. He obviously sent him to Spain to see what he was worth, and he wouldn't have put that buyback clause if he didn't still believe in him and that he wanted an option on him. So I could see him going. I guess the Arsenal link is Arteta, probably. Like he must know him better than
I don't think Arteta will know him that well, because he never came to City. I mean, we bought him and then loaned him out.
True.
So he's had no time at City. I think, look, Arsenal are linked with nearly as many players as United are. If you've got two legs, you'd be linked with Arsenal. So I don't know if that's what the link has come from.
But I guess also with Douglas Luiz, he's played in Spain as well, so maybe that's a bigger pool of teams who they know he can adapt to that league. Now, he was a relatively, well, he was a Premier League and now shown he can play in the Premier League. So there's no doubt a load of suitors for him. And it's that, I know it's funny that role is so important. It's almost become one of the most important roles of the last kind of, like the Premier League era. What used to be called the Claude Makelele role, isn't it?
Yeah, Makelele, Kante.
Yeah.
Fabinho, Fernandinho. Everybody's got that defensive midfielder.
And you need it. And so, it's let's hope we can keep on to him. We'd be upset as Villa fans if he left, but you could also understand why he would.
I mean, I look at what Pep's done. He reminds me. I mean, Douglas Luiz reminds me of what Fernandinho does. He sits in front of the defence. His job is to break up the attack, whether by fair meals or foul, and to pass it around comfortably, get the odd goal here and there. And that's what Fernandinho does. And that sounds like what Douglas Luiz does. Now, it may be City, we've moved away slightly from that, because last summer when Pep wanted to get Jorginho, he couldn't get, I was at the summer before, couldn't get Jorginho, who is not the same as Fernandinho. He was more of like a metronome, get the ball, pass it, get the ball. He's not great at defending. And we went out and got Rodri last summer, who's very much like Jorginho as well. Get the ball, pass the ball, get the ball, pass the ball. Not so good at defending. He's improved on that. So it might be that the chance for Douglas Luiz at City is gone. It depends, obviously, how long Pep stays. I mean, Pep might leave this summer, next summer. We just don't know. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out in my own mind what the chances of him coming to City. I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm just trying to look whether he'd qualify as homegrown. I think that's a big issue as well. And the rules are, he's 20 in his 21st season. I need to check this, but you have to have done 3 years or 36 months or 3 seasons during the season of your 21st birthday. And Douglas Luiz, so you'd have had to, I guess, I'm just checking. You probably don't know what day his birthday is, what date of the year, and that's not something I know. But that's something I'd have to check up on. Let's have a quick look. His birthday is 9th of May. 9th of May. So he was 21. He was 22 during the season. I think he might qualify as homegrown because he'd been on City's books for 3 years by the time of his 21st birthday or the season of his 21st. I'll have to go and check that because he was 21. It's really it's one of those where you have to read it again and again and just to make sure. Why couldn't we have got him a year earlier? It would have been easy. So I think that makes a difference. If you're homegrown, that makes a huge difference. And I just got this feeling he was 22 during the season. He might not be, but I'd have to go and check the Premier League rules on that because that would make a massive difference for City. Yeah. We had 17 non-homegrown players already this season. We've let a few go. We're going to get some more in. But if someone's homegrown, like Cesc Fabregas, I mean, it's crazy, but Cesc Fabregas is homegrown. Eric Dyer plays for England. He's non-homegrown because of his time abroad. So I think that would make a difference. I mean, I think my last question, I'm just trying to think of this. If he did stay at Villa, if you could keep, and I'll ask a question about Villa, if you could keep the core of your team, like you, McGinn, like your Tyrone Mings, Grealish, Douglas Luiz, and add 2 or 3 quality players, whether in defence or attack, how could you do this next season? And how could that improve Douglas Luiz playing with better players?
I think Douglas will improve most by having better defenders around him. So, we actually towards the last 4 games of the season, we won 2 and drew 2, which was like, that's for us over the course of the season that was seen us safe easily. But we need more defensive investment. We need a new right back. We need a new centre back. We arguably need a new goalkeeper. We definitely haven't quite figured out that there's another midfielder there so there's Douglas, there's John McGinn, and there's Grealish, but there's another midfielder which we didn't quite nail down whose role that was. And we desperately need a striker. We've been through strikers faster than hot dinners. And not just do we need that, we need a striker who can hit the ground running in the Premier League. We were trying to apparently get Giroud in the winter transfer window, which would have been great, really. But we still don't have that kind of established Premier League striker. But I think if we managed that investment, we could go back to the days of when I was growing up. So Villa in the mid-90s, where Villa were consistently finishing top six. We came second in the first Premier League, which was a high for sure. But we could be on the extremes of that, that top. I don't even know what is it these days? Is it top 4, top 6?
It depends where Arsenal finish now. It'll be the top 8 next, or the top 10.
Yeah.
Have you got the money? Have you got the money to make those investments? That's always the question.
I think so. I mean, if we'd have got relegated this year, then it would have been financially very, very difficult for us. We've got very rich owners. But at the same time, there's only, and as Man City will know, there's only a certain amount of flex for how much you can spend money. There's lots of different ways, and Villa have been investigating all the different ways of doing it, just as much as all the other clubs. So that would have been very, very tricky for us to financially in the long term. But I think staying up an extra year of kind of Premier League stability means that they will invest, and the owners have said that. Depends on Dean Smith's desire to really, really push out the boat in terms of signings. I mean, yes, we signed quite a lot of. You said we signed over 100 million worth of player, but there wasn't a one standout within that. There was a lot of relatively expensive signings, and I'm not sure that's particularly the way that you build a team that can push on to the top 6. We need like the top class signings that we used to get 20 years or so ago. But at the same time, unfortunately, and it depresses me to say that, signing for Villa is not the same draw that it was 25 years ago. And if you're a decent player and you get the choice to go and sit on Arsenal's bench or go and play for Villa, even that's not necessarily a clear-cut decision, right? I'd love it to say that you choose Villa every day, but I'm not necessarily sure you would. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg situation. I think we need to prove our Premier League safety first. Like I think we could do with doing a little bit what a Wolves or a Sheffield United done of prove that they can beat the top teams, but at the same time they're not necessarily pushing on that hard for it. And then once we establish a couple of maybe top 12, top half of the table finishes, then we can really push on. But it's going to be a long term play. And actually, one of the long term plays that we're doing already is really investing in our youth team. So our kind of at an under 16 or an under 17 level at Villa now is probably the best in the country. So it's a real long term play. But that won't come to pay its dividends for a few years to come.
Yeah, it's fantastic, Matt. Hopefully everybody's learned a little bit more about Douglas Luiz. I mean, actually, the funny thing is I've been running this channel since June last year, and the biggest video I did, the most views, was Douglas Luiz video when he signed for Villa.
Interesting.
Because basically the Villa fans didn't know anything about him. You just signed this guy out of the blue, right at the death, and you knew nothing about him. Over 2 days, it broke all my records. I've never got back to those heights. It was just, I mean, but it actually just shows how big a club Villa are. How big a club Villa are, that what a big fan base you've got when things are going in a positive way for Villa. The fans are crazy, and that's probably almost double the next highest video I did in the last 13-14 months. So I've got to say a big thank you to the Villa fans, because I look back at that, I think I still don't understand it. But I just said it must be just so many Villa fans want they were back in the big time, and they want to know about the players that you're getting that they've never heard of. So it's still probably, I guess, it's a relief staying up, but it's also going to be a really exciting time for who you're going to buy in this summer and how you're going to be play next season. So, do you know we still haven't heard. We're hopefully going to find out soon if there's going to be fans at grounds. Do you miss that?
Yeah. I think everyone misses it, really. I think what the most likely situation is that I think we will get fans in stadiums this season, but it won't be at the start of the season, and it'll be still capped at 50% max, probably 20%.
Yeah, I think 20% sounds right.
But you do miss it. I also find one thing that, and in my personal football viewing habits, is that I just find it less engaging to watch games that I just don't care about. Without the fans, there's just like this added element where I'll watch the Villa games and get really engaged in it, but it just has that missing like pizzazz of what like a Premier League spectacle gives you.
Yeah,
what do you think?
No, I agree. I hardly watched any of the games. I didn't want to. I was not interested. It was hard enough watching the City ones. I watched a couple of German ones when Germany started, and then when they started putting the fan noise through the speakers. Okay, that was a little. I think that was a little bit better without the fan. Even with the artificial noise, it was a little bit better. But I find it very difficult to watch any of the games besides the City games. There's a lot of games concertinated together, and it didn't feel right. And you watch your own team, but that's it. I mean, even the Champions League, there was a game the other night, Napoli versus Barcelona. I wasn't interested. I mean, it sounds crazy. You got Messi playing, and you got Koulibaly, who we're hoping to sign, but I wasn't interested. I actually went off and watched the City game against Real Madrid. I watched that full game again instead of watching. I just wasn't interested. And maybe I'll start picking up, because obviously as we go, hopefully deeper in the competition, I'll be interested to see what the opposition's like. But, roll on next season for me, and hopefully roll on fans coming back.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more.
Well, fantastic, Matt. Hopefully you have a good evening, mate. And
thanks.
Maybe we'll speak again during the season.
Great. Cheers. Thanks, Ryan.